All right, welcome to the Town of Bel Air Board of Appeals. I would now like to call the meeting to order. To start the meeting off, I'd like to ask if there are any changes to the agenda. All right, if no changes, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The agenda is now approved. This time I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from, what's the date? September 17th of 2024.
I move to approve the minutes of September the 17th, 2024, as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The minutes from September 22nd meeting are now approved.
Can you guys pull your mics up? The recorder's having issues, sorry. She's having issues hearing you. Thanks.
All right, the first order of business is for the application for a variance for Hickory Flats Apartments. I'd like to start off with the staff report from Kevin Small.
Thank you. A couple of housekeeping items. Everybody in the audience, if you can silence your cell phones, that'd be appreciated. Note that the bathrooms are off to your left. Also for you, speak into microphones as this is being recorded. Also give your name and address when you get up to speak. Property was posted on November 8th. It was advertised also on November 8th, and adjacent property owners were notified November 1st. The hearing is for a variance tonight. It's a variance to the building height. It's not a hearing to review the site plan. So any discussion or testimony regarding something that's not directly relatable to the variance application is something that you will be reminded is not germane. The property application is for 28 North Hickory Avenue. 28 North Hickory is B2A zoned. It's familiarly referred to as Hickory Flats. The neighborhood is defined by the staff as Main Street to 300 feet east of Hickory Avenue and Lee Street to Cortlandt Street. The applicant received a 1.5-foot variance from the building height limit of 45 feet and April 27th of 2022 when that variance expired. Project received subdivision, site plan, and landscape plan approval as part of the Planning Commission case on December 2nd, 2022. The applicant has submitted a timely extension request for that site plan approval. Tonight, the applicant's requesting a variance to section 165-31D and table 165-31 of a 1.5 feet for a total building height of 46.5 feet from the required B2A zoning maximum of 45 feet. At a minimum, the board must find that the existing property has unique conditions that are not generally shared by the surrounding properties, and the applicant will have practical difficulty meeting the Bel Air Code as related to the request. Proposed development is a 4-story multi-family development with 87 dwelling units, 69 one-bedroom, 18 two-bedroom. And again, that was approved on December 2nd, 2022. The applicant's requesting a variance to the 45-foot building height of 1.5 feet. This will allow the proposed structure, again, to be 46.5 feet tall. This excludes parapet walls, elevator towers, and other architectural elements. The applicants provided detailed elevations of and a plan of the proposed site development showing the proposed building at various points along the perimeter of the structure. The exhibits verify the building height calculation based on the average contact with grade as provided by the town code in 165-104. It is suggested the applicant address relationship to the neighborhood by describing or showing the proposed structure and surrounding buildings such as the municipal parking garage, Harco Credit Union, and other structures. The proposed 4-story building will not reach the height of the existing parking garage. However, it may be beneficial to understand that context. As shown on the submitted site plan, the property slopes west to east with an elevation change of 17 feet. The highest elevation appears to be 370 at the southwest corner, and the lowest elevation 353 at the northeast corner, which is along Hickory Avenue. Building perimeter grade elevations noted on the exhibit provided vary from 355.25 to 369.5. The building height exhibit shows an average building height of 45.19 feet based on calculations. The applicant will need to address the difference between the proposed variance of 46.5 and the calculated building height. The Board of Appeals may apply a lesser relaxation of the code based on the variance criteria. 3 properties were consolidated into one parcel on April 9th, 2024. The resulting property contains multiple boundary lines with an inefficient configuration. The request is a minor adjustment to the maximum building height, constituting approximately 3% increase in overall height. The parking garage adjacent is 6 stories, estimated height of 65 feet along Hickory Avenue. And that's non-conforming. It actually exceeds the maximum building height for the B2A zone. Most other properties are 1 or 2 stories except for the Board of Education, which is 4. Again, that's also along Hickory Avenue. I have recommendations, but I'll hold those until the applicant has had their presentation. I believe Robert Cahoe.
Good evening. Bob Cahoe, 9 South Hickory Avenue. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's on.
9 South Hickory Avenue. I'm representing 28 North Hickory LLC. We're here, as Kevin's indicated, requesting a height variance of 1.5 feet. This was exactly the same request that was before the Board of Appeals back in April of 2022. There's been no significant change in the plan since that time. I would suggest there's no change in the neighborhood. You heard from Mr. Miner of Frederick Ward Associates, engineer who's worked on the project since its inception. He will discuss the neighborhood, and briefly, there's been no significant change, no change at all that I'm aware of, and essentially no change since April of 2022. After the variance was granted and then the parking reduction request was denied by the board, the Planning Commission eventually approved a site plan later that year, made no significant changes to that as was proposed. Been no changes since that time. Site plan approval will expire in December, I believe, and we have requested a 2-year extension of site plan approval. The applicants are committed to going forward with the project. They inadvertently overlooked the expiration of the variance. Variances expire after 2 years. They have a life of 2 years. We know it, not everybody is aware of that, and given other things that were happening earlier in the year, that was overlooked. So we're asking the same thing. We could have been asking for an extension of the variance. The same evidence is going to be presented that would have been presented in that situation. It's pretty obvious why we're requesting the variance. Look outside, look across the street. You can see the change in the elevation of the lot. It's low on this end, it's higher on the other end. That causes an elevation of the facade which is more apparent, is longer, is higher on this side than it does on the other. I'm talking as a layman, than on the west side. So variance is a typical mechanism when you have oddly shaped parcels, or parcels that give you some sort of problem with complying with the code requirements. So the variance request is minor, in my opinion. 1.5 feet over an extension of over a height of 45 feet, allowable 45 feet. Mr. Minor from Frederick Ward Associates will be testifying tonight. Brad Shapiro and Matt Garona, who are principals of the applicant, are here. They'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. I don't intend to call them, but they're here to answer questions if you have any of them, have any questions. I'll call Tom Minor as my first and only witness.
Is this, are you going to do question and answer? Because he could set up over there if you'd like.
More or less.
Okay. You want to,
Do we need a resume?
I'm sorry, was the question, do you need a resume?
Do we need a resume from the expert witness?
I believe he's been accepted
Been accepted as an expert before the board before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Bob, if you can put that on the record.
I'm sorry, your name and address, please?
No, can you put it on the record during your direct that Mr. Minor has been admitted as an expert in his related field before the Board of Appeals for Bel Air previously?
You've been admitted before the Board of
Yes.
Appeals as an expert? I
Thank
believe?
you.
As an expert,
I
Mr.
am,
Minor?
yes.
And what was that in?
I believe it was on this project.
I'm sorry?
I believe it was on this project previously.
in what field?
In what field? As an engineer.
Can we get him sworn in first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Yeah, can you give us your name and address, please, Mr. Minor?
Tom Minor, 5 South Main Street, Bel Air, Maryland, with Frederick Ward Associates.
And how long have you been employed by Frederick Ward Associates?
7 years.
Good. And what's your occupation?
Engineer.
And what are your certifications, if any, as an engineer?
Licensed in the state of Maryland along with a number of other states, and then also certified construction manager.
You do site plan design?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the Bel Air Town Code and zoning code in particular?
Yes.
And have you been involved with this project since its inception?
Yes.
And have you designed and prepared the site plan?
Yes.
You and your other people in your office under your supervision?
Other
correct?
people along with myself, correct.
Correct. Do you want to describe somewhat briefly the project?
Sure. So the project entails the construction of 87 for-rent units. That includes 23, let's see, just to give you the unit count. Well, I guess that's the site plan, but 18 units on the first floor, then 23 on the second, third, and fourth floor. The mixture count of 1 and 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom units. And the site's located on Hickory Avenue, as you mentioned before. We have connectivity both through Main Street and North Hickory Avenue. Again, that's one of the constraints, that the uniqueness of the property that I can go in later. But it's an apartment project with 4-story construction.
All parking will be on site.
Parking is on site along with some additional parking provided off-site at the parking garage. Yes. So this is the submitted variance request for this application.
Exhibit 1?
This wasn't in the packet. Okay.
Yeah, so anything that was in the packet, along with any of the PDFs that were up here, were in the package as well, just for ease of view.
It's dated 10/22/2024. 10/22/2024. Take it here.
Ten 22-24. And we're here requesting a height variance, correct, Mr. Minor?
That's correct.
Why are we here requesting a height variance?
It expired approximately 2 years ago, and we have to re-up.
And why do we need a variance for the property?
So the property's configuration results in a pretty extreme hardship trying to be able to meet the current county's or town's 45-foot height variance or height requirement. So this height variance is allowing us to fit the building in place while also making measures to reduce our height to as minimal as possible.
And both the configuration and the topography of the property is unusual, is that correct?
Correct. As you can see, we kind of shaped the building to best fit the property.
Fairly narrow property, if not much depth, and the topography changes how much from front to back?
It's approximately 17 to 18 feet, depending on where you take the grade line in the back, which is pretty substantial for only having 45 feet of building height available.
So those are unusual characteristics of this, of a property?
Yes, comparatively to the rest of the town of Bel Air, it makes it unique.
So is a 1.5 height variance sufficient to alleviate the problem?
Correct, yes.
Very fine. Essentially, if the building were set on a level lot, a variance would not be necessary.
That
accurate?
is correct. If it was on a level lot, we wouldn't be needing this variance.
In this corner, at this corner, being the northeast side, more of the facade is visible from the street than it would be from the west side. Is that correct?
Correct. We are burying, additionally to try to reduce our exposure, we're burying the southern end of the building. You can see the retaining walls on that southern end there. So we're, again, trying to reduce our height that we have to provide.
There's nothing else.
Can you point out where you're talking about, the southwest, did you say, corner?
So the retaining wall portion that we're
Yes.
discussing. So the retaining wall portion is to the south of the site. It would be adjacent to maybe parcel 858. There's a-
Can you just stand up and point?
Oh,
to
sure,
it
I
on
can-
the-
yeah, I can
That would
point.
probably be the easiest way to do it.
So the retaining wall is located back here.
Okay.
That's, it's like, I believe 10 feet or so. It's fairly sizable. Again, this is to be able to dig in and actually be able to get a flat area to work with. And then additionally, the actual building itself is retaining grade in this area to reduce the overall height aspects as
Okay,
well.
And while you're standing there, at what part of the building extends over the 45-foot limit?
Sorry, I'm gonna have to go to my elevation views for a second to show the exact location where it starts. Actually, I'll do this one there. That'll do. So that begins at elevation 5 here. You can see that there.
I don't see the mouse.
Let me zoom in.
They can't see the mouse on those screens. Just
Can you see it?
FYI.
See it over there.
You can see
see
it
it?
on this.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a. Well, here, you know what? I can point. So elevation 5 here. So that corresponds with this here. And then it continues on until elevation point 21, which is right there. So this piece here is above. This side all back here is lower.
Okay.
Mr. Meyer, just describe the neighborhood if you could, please.
Sure. So to the south, we have the parking garage, which is noted to be substantially higher than this structure. The rest of the surrounding structures are either commercial or municipal servicing buildings, such as the library and town hall that we're in now.
What's the height of the parking garage, do you know?
Approximately 65 feet, depending again with the grade elevations that they're working with in that corner.
Your opinion, will there be any adverse impact on the neighborhood if the height variance is granted?
No, this wouldn't even be noticeable between the 45 and 46 and a half.
Anything else, Mr. Martin? Anything you'd like to add to the testimony?
So there's a little bit of, Kevin had noted earlier, there was a note of the actual height as you run the exact numbers here when we take our sections. And then there's also the noted 46 and a half request. So the front of the building here, we have it graded out, so it basically runs grade up at a 3-to-1, which is 3 foot across, 1 foot up. It slopes up to the building. Keeping the 1.5 feet kind of allows us to have that grading flexibility in there. Grades settle, things shift a little bit, just general constructability. Keeping this request in kind just allows us to have that kind of reasonableness when we're out in the field actually building this, to be meeting, close grades when we're talking about this much at dirt moves. So the request to kind of keep it in that line would be beneficial overall to the project and the just general functionality of going out there and building things.
So to be clear, the 45.9 average is the actual, and you're saying it's 46 and a half just for constructability?
So it's 45.19. Sorry, I didn't hear the exact number you said. So that about 3 inches
Yeah.
is the exact number that we need there. However, if we are given 3 inches and the grade settles by this much around areas that are soft graded, granted if we have hard concrete surfaces, but if we get that exact amount, then we're setting ourselves up to potentially have problems if someone went and remeasured all those spots again.
Understood.
And again, with the grade dropping, particularly in the front of this building, some of it's subject to where you start taking your cuts even, because you get a little bit of averaging with that. So again, kind of keeping in line with the previous approval, we would just like to have the same consideration.
Okay.
So I'll have to add unless someone has any questions.
Any other questions for Mr. Minor?
I had a couple of questions for the record, if you will, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minor, one quick question that I had is Mr. Small identified the neighborhood in this area. Is there any other buildings other than the parking garage that you can identify that would exceed this height?
I haven't done a study to see if there's any other buildings directly adjacent or from a distance.
Okay.
So I can't answer that precisely other than the directly adjacent structure is well over this height.
Okay. And then you identified a portion of the structure on the site plan as being in excess of the 45 feet height restriction under the code. What would you estimate to be the percentage or fractional interest of the building that is actually over the amount? So in other words, it's not the entire building. Is that correct?
Correct. It's not the entire building. So they're, let's say, probably maybe 20%, maybe
Okay.
25, somewhere between 20 and 25% would be my
Okay, so the rest of the
estimate.
building would be consistent with the town code at
Correct.
45
Yes.
or
And
less.
I guess something to note as you're kind of asking that is part of the reason why we have that exposure is the entrance onto Hickory Avenue, and that's kind of a fire request that they had would have circulation and such. So we have to push that entrance down to get that access for fire trucks and such. So that's one of the main reasons. I mean, on a site that we didn't have to have 2 points of ingress egress like that, then you would just have 1 point of ingress egress, and you might have to do retaining walls and everything else. But because we have to have those 2 points, it reduces that flexibility and results in that unique connection points that we have to have.
I don't have anything else.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, the public would have a chance to ask him questions too.
Open it up.
Correct? The public has a chance to ask
To
Mr. Minor
to Mr.
questions.
Minor. Okay.
If anybody would
Mr.
like-
Minor, if you want to take the seat back over here.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone in the general public have any questions for Mr. Minor? You can come up to the podium, please state your name and address.
I actually have several questions for Mr. Minor and, well, as well for members of the board. My name is Vincent McHugh. I'm at 422 East Broadway.
Mr. McHugh, just questions at this point. You'll get a chance to
Okay.
make statements later.
No, I'm not going to make any statements. This is just all questions at this point. I'll provide comments later if I'm allowed.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Mr. Kao has already stated the original height variance has expired for this project. However, since that has expired, is this a new application for a variance?
I'm going to have to defer to the attorney for how that's viewed.
Okay, great, thank you. So in Article 12, Section 16592 of the Bel Air Development Regulations, Chapter 11, quote, "In order to grant a variance, the Board of Appeals must find by clear and convincing evidence each of the following: A, uniqueness, whereby the subject property has an inherent characteristic or condition not generally shared by other surrounding properties, and practical difficulty." Is that correct?
Questions
Are
are
you
from
asking
Mr.
me
I'm
Minor.
sorry, the questioning is for the witness, Mr. Minor. It's not for the board.
Okay.
You're free to ask that question
Okay,
of Mr.
okay,
Minor.
okay, fine.
Okay.
All right, on the building height exhibit Hickory Flats that you provided, what is the elevation to the south at points 38 and 39?
Proposed elevation?
On the exhibit, point 11, I'm sorry, points 38 and 39, what is the identified elevation?
Sure. $369.5 and $369.5.
Okay. On that same exhibit, what's the elevation to the north at point 11?
$355.25.
Thank you. And what's the difference between those two, between the 369.5 and the 355.25?
$14.25.
Okay. And another question with regard to that drawing. What is the straight line horizontal distance between either points 38 and point 39 and point 11? I can tell you what I approximated at using your scale, but
Sure.
you're the witness.
Go with, what's your approximation?
My approximation is about 250 feet.
Okay.
Okay, so would you concede then that the grade of this property slopes 14.25 feet over a distance of about 250 feet?
That's for the proposed grades?
That's for the elevations as they're identified between points 38 or point 39 and 11. Essentially the width of the building along Hickory Avenue.
Correct. That's the proposed grades.
Okay, so the slope of about 14.25 feet with over a distance of about 250 feet.
Sure. I just want to specify there that the uniqueness constitutes the existing conditions on the site, not the proposed conditions that we're having to basically manipulate. And
Well,
work
I'm just
with.
trying to get some determination as to uniqueness with how this compares to other properties that are in the surrounding area when it's complete.
Okay.
Okay? So is the public library on the corner of Hickory Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue a surrounding property?
Be an adjacent property, correct?
Okay. So have you determined what the elevations are for the library, both at the east end of the library, where it is at its lowest point, and at the southwest corner of the library, which is at its highest point?
Not for this exercise, no.
Okay, so I'll provide in my comments some information about what I've determined to be those elevations and what that slope is, and I'll show in my comments that the library is substantially the same in terms of slope and topography as the proposed project that is here for Hickory Flats. Okay, I think those are all the questions I have for Mr. Minor, but do have other questions. Will I have an opportunity to ask those later?
Yes, you will.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Minor? Please approach the stand. State your name and address, please.
Good evening, Mr. Minor and board members. Terrence Hanley, 314 East Broadway, Bel Air, Maryland. Just for the record, maybe in some housekeeping, on the application that was submitted to the town of Bel Air, it did say that list all structures and properties currently in use. It has 2 existing dwellings, a residential garage, and an abandoned parking lot. There's only 1 dwelling left. The other ones were raised, so I just wanted to put that into the record. So it may have been an oversight, but I just wanted to bring that up for the record. Mr. Minor, his first thing regarding this property was a hardship. He said that that is why they are requiring a variance, is a hardship. And if you look at the justifications for a variance in the town of Bel Air on the appeals application, which has been filed, in this instance, the subject property and topography and grade thereon is unique and it generally shared by other surrounding properties. This grade imposes practical restrictions on the subject property. Also, too, the subject property is at a disadvantage in comparison with surrounding properties, especially when compared with the town parking garage located across Pennsylvania Avenue, which is 6 stories in height. I do say that I don't think it is fair to compare this proposed project to public buildings, a public parking garage, nor a governmental building. Question to you is, I believe that governmental buildings are less scrutiny to private development. Is that correct?
Generally speaking, yes.
Thank you. Also, too, granting the application request would permit development of the subject property as shown on the attached site plan. The proposed building would enhance the neighborhood and would be an attractive, natural, thus benefiting other property owners in the area. This by far, is subjective. I don't think the citizens of Bel Air would agree with you on this, sir. So, I don't know where you came up with that, but again, that is subjective, and that was submitted in your application.
I think the evaluation on that, I guess if there's a question, would be based on the tax rolls that it would be generating.
I'm sorry?
I think the evaluation of that is based on the tax rolls that get created from that. I mean, it would enhance.
Well, the tax
Properties
rolls,
there.
actually, apartments are negative on the tax rolls, sir. So, bottom line there is, the cost of services to service apartments are actually a negative drain on the tax rolls with local government and county government.
I'm simply speaking on the tax on the property itself.
On the general tax of the
Yeah,
entire
current,
property.
current state versus the improved
But we
state.
do have to service, I believe it's 84 units, correct?
That portion isn't, I'm not responding to that. I'm just saying that based on the current,
But those units will require fire, ambulance services, hospital services, of course, traffic services as well, correct? And utilize our facilities and public roads here in Harford County
I
and Bel Air.
think we've kind of gone beyond the scope of the direct examination of Mr. Minor at this point, Mr.
Well, he
Garrity.
did claim that it was a hardship. I'm just trying to see where the hardship is. Clearly, a hardship to
he's-
me is, Mr. Minor, would you agree with me? A hardship on a property would be a brownfield, floodplain, swamp, variance on a setback of a property. I look across the street, that's a beautiful piece of property. I don't see any hardship there. I wish I owned it.
trying to design the building there, it was definitely a hardship from the designer's perspective. I very much struggled to get the access and site to facilitate around there.
Well,
From
my
an
question to
engineering-
you then,
my
if
engineering
it is
perspective,
in
yes, it
fact
was
a
a hardship.
hardship to do what you want to do, but clearly it's B2 property. So essentially what you've done is maxed it out to the maximum potential, which I don't blame anybody would do that. But clearly, you shouldn't need a variance for a property that's not a hardship.
In my opinion, it was a hardship, or is a hardship.
Very good, thank you. I disagree strongly.
Good evening. Errol Edding, 507 North Shamrock Road, Bel Air. Just one quick question. How tall are the apartments, the ceilings in the buildings there?
I believe they're 9-foot inside height.
Okay. So if they were 8 foot and 8 foot is code, right? Would you need the variance if you built to code? Is 8 foot the code?
There's a lot of different code components. I think that has an issue with the
So,
functionality of the building.
The question is, if you could build it to code, is it market reasons that you're building it as opposed to a higher ceiling than the fact that, what would code be? Can you, I mean, you said you were familiar with Bel Air code.
Sure.
What is the code?
That's a building code question, engineering. So that would be like more of an architectural type question.
Okay, I did think you said you were an expert familiar with the building code of Bel Air, right?
With building, not with residential or
Well, this is
R13,
a
13R building
apartment.
code.
Could you
Correct.
find out, or does anybody know what the requirement is? Because you said there'll be 9 feet, so if it was 8 feet, you could build it without the variance?
A building code question is not something I can just answer on the spot
Okay.
with what is building code
Does anybody
requirements.
know what the code is?
I think that would be for your statement later.
Oh, it's not, it's a question, not a statement. If somebody knows.
I know, but
it
you're
don't-
asking the expert
Okay,
witness.
Okay, if you could find out while I'm, waiting. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Minor?
Mr. Ko, do you want to redirect?
All right, do you have any other witnesses that you'd like to call?
No, sir. I said I have Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Garono here. If anybody has any questions of them, they're the principals. They would testify that they're wholeheartedly committed to the project, and they're anxious to continue to go through with it, so.
I do have one question for them.
Sure.
I'll say a few words. Okay. Please state your name and address, please.
Brad Shapiro, 28 North Hickory, LLC. I'll just say a few words real quickly.
Just need your address as well.
222 West Reed, Baltimore, Maryland, 21202. I wanted to just say a few words tonight. I wanted to first express a deep appreciation for this board that approved our small variance 2 years ago. And I want to make sure that everybody here knows that it's my fault that we're here tonight, okay? I was not aware that there was a 2-year expiration of the variance. I reviewed the approval letter. I looked at it again this morning. I looked at our Planning Commission approval letter. Both of those documents are silent on the expiration of our approvals. So despite not knowing this, and despite not getting this information from prior council or from the town, I must take the blame for that. However, I want to ensure the board tonight that nothing has changed. We are not here asking for anything new. In fact, it's my understanding that while we're asking for a 1.5 foot variance, which was granted 2 years ago, in practice, it's 2 inches that we're asking for, so that we continue to work on this exciting project that will serve the town of Bel Air for generations to come. We are here in good faith. Over the last 2 years, we have faced massive challenges in the economy with the interest rates, most recently with local government. But we are not discouraged. We continue to invest the time and the energy and the capital because we want to participate in the future growth of Bel Air. And I think one thing that we can all agree on is that people want to live in the town of Bel Air. People want to live in something new and beautiful and nice. And we're pleased to let you know that we do have a construction loan in place. We're working diligently to capitalize this project. So again, I just want to thank you again for your time tonight and for your consideration for this 2-inch variance.
Thank you. Any questions? No, you answered my question.
Thank you.
Just in closing, if I may, I just want to make sure one thing is clear. Mr. Minor, I specifically asked him if he was familiar with the Bel Air Town Code and the particularly the zoning code portion of the code. He said he was. The building permit department, the building code is not part of the building code's Harford County. So he was not trying to make a misstatement. I'm sorry there was some confusion about that. He did not qualify him as an expert in building code. Just before I sit down, we're not asking for something that could not generally be done on the site. This 4-story building could be built on this site. It meets parking requirements, otherwise would meet height requirements, meets setback requirements, except for a peculiarity with this site. And that is the topographical issues that are unusual to this parcel for this project. So we're not asking for something that can't be done. We're asking for a very small adjustment to allow the principal use that could otherwise be made of this property to be constructed. Thank you much.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open it up to any opposition or any public comments. Please feel free to come up to the stand, state your name and address, and state your case.
Vince McHugh, 422 East Broadway. If I may, can I start with a couple questions to the board? And then I'll provide some comments at the
I'm
end.
not sure if we're going to be able to answer them, but
Okay,
you can
well,
ask.
to the best of your ability. So the first question is that I started to ask was, doesn't it say in Article 12, Section 16592 of the regulations, that, quote, in order to grant a variance, the Board of Appeals must find by clear and convincing evidence each, and I emphasize that, of the following: A, uniqueness, whereby the subject property has an inherent characteristic or condition not generally shared by other surrounding properties, and B, a practical difficulty. I'm reading that right out of the code. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So addressing the uniqueness aspect of this property, doesn't the request and justification for a variance submitted by Mr. Cahill on page 1 state that, quote, the subject property and the topography and grade thereon is unique and not generally shared by other surrounding properties? And again, I'm reading directly from his request for variance. Is that correct?
You read it.
I'm
gonna step in for just a second. I feel the need to put this on the record. This board is a quasi-judicial board. It is the fact finder of the evidence, and it has to take the facts and apply it to the law. The board is acting as a judge. You don't go in to the court and ask the judge questions on direct examination. This is like highly improper. So, I mean, if the public wants to say comments of what they like and what they don't like and what they don't believe is unique, that is entirely, totally proper, and the board can hear their side of it. But you guys are not witnesses. You're not, and you can't be treated as such, and you're not qualified to give legal advice. If he has questions about what the standard is, he needs to go consult with an attorney, not the board. So, I mean, I'll leave it up to the chair as to how you're going to handle it. This is entirely improper, and I'm worried about it. Do you see what I'm saying?
I agree with that.
And I'm
This
trying
is
to get-
not proper. It's not consistent with Maryland law and how quasi-judicial proceedings are handled. This is not an informal hearing.
I'm trying to get clarification on what the requirements are.
If you wanted
for-
clarification, you had the opportunity to consult with the council. They're not your attorneys. They don't
Okay.
answer questions, legal questions. They are to apply the facts to the standard under Maryland law and the town code and issue an opinion, period, end of story. That's what they do.
Okay, let me refer to the library, which has already been determined to be a surrounding property.
I think it was adjacent, was the term.
Well, it's described as a surrounding property in the code. It doesn't say whether it's adjacent, abutting, or otherwise. So I've looked at the data for the elevation at the library, and at the east end of the library, it's approximately 347 feet. At the elevation at the southwest corner of the library, it's approximately 359 feet. So that difference in elevation is about 12 feet. So when I've looked at the straight line horizontal distance from the southwest corner of the library to the east end of the library, down where the pickup window is, it's about 240 feet. So my point here is that the grade of the library property, which is a surrounding property, slopes approximately 12 feet over a distance of approximately 240 feet. And you compare this to the subject property that slopes 14.25 feet, as has been testified, over a distance of about 250 feet. So my question is, wouldn't you say that those two properties are similar and that they're not unique?
Again, this is not a question.
I understand
This is a
it's,
statement.
it's a rhetorical question. So finally, just my comments are, given that the previous variance for the subject properties expired, this request for variance is new and separate from any prior reviews and approvals. Therefore, this request for variance must be considered and evaluated again in full based on specific criteria as identified in the Bel Air Town Code. This request for variance must be considered and evaluated again in full whether or not the prior request for variance legitimately met all criteria within the Town Code. If approved, this request for variance must obtain a new approval designation. The Town Code states that in order to be granted a variance, the Board of Appeals must find by clear and convincing evidence that the subject property has each of the following: uniqueness and practical difficulty. It is a fact that a surrounding property, specifically the Bel Air Public Library, shares the same topography and slope as the subject property. This fact negates the statement in the request and justification for a variance that for the subject property, quote, the topography and grade thereon is unique and not generally shared by other surrounding properties, end quote. It is a fact that the subject property is not unique when compared to surrounding properties. This fact alone dictates that this request for variance must be denied. With regard to practical difficulty, the request and justification for a variance says that the grade on the, quote, the grade on the subject property renders the subject property at a disadvantage in comparison with surrounding properties. The developers have not demonstrated how their proposed project is at a disadvantage, especially in comparison to the surrounding property, specifically with regard to the public library or the parking garage. This fact alone, therefore, dictates that this request for variance must be denied. Based on the fact that the subject property is not unique and based on the fact that there is not a practical difficulty because the subject property is not unique, this request for variance must be denied. Finally, an apartment building or another building could be built on this site with a lower height or a stepped height to be in compliance with the zoning and applicable building codes and not require a variance. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Please come up to the podium.
Just comments.
Just comments, no questions.
No questions, just comments. Terrence Hanley, 314 East Broadway, Bel Air, Maryland. I have the utmost respect for Mr. Cahoe. I do know that he was not the original attorney that approached this board back in the April 26th. So Mr. Cahoe was not the original attorney that had this variance approved. And again, I have tons of respect for Mr. Cahoe. There's no doubt about it. But it clearly states as well, granting the variance would do substantial justice to the applicant as well as to the other property owners in the area. Think about that. Substantial justice to the applicant as well as the other property owners in the area. That's absurd. This does not do anybody in the other areas any justice whatsoever by giving a variance for something that someone claims is a hardship when clearly this is not a hardship. build within your means, do what you need. I think one of the most egregious things of this whole thing is we have a parking garage, a public parking garage, that we gave up public parking space to a private developer so that they could do their project. That is utterly ridiculous.
We're not talking about
Well, it's
any public
part
parking.
of this.
Only
It's
about
part of this
the,
project. But again, the variance as well. Why would we give a variance for something that is not needed? This is B2 property. The topography is no different than any other surrounding properties. You certainly cannot compare this to a parking garage or a Board of Education building. So I will tell you this. I think we all saw what happened in the last election, and this is comments, and I'm free to say what I want, and I'm going to say what I want. You don't work for Mr. Small. You don't work for the town council. You work for the citizens of Bel Air. And I think in this last election, they spoke loud and clear that they are tired of people bending the rules, constantly bending for developers and not doing what the citizens want and the will of the people of Bel Air. They loudly spoke, it was resounding, and everybody knows it. Why would we give a variance when it's not necessary? There is no need to give a variance on this project. It's a beautiful piece of land. I hope they come back with some beautiful high-end townhomes or something that they can fit in this project without bending the rules, breaking the law, and doing what the staff wants, not what the citizens want. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Good evening. My name is Karen Chismar, and often as the last person to speak, I'm repeating a lot of things that people have already said, but I live at 321 East Broadway. A year ago, we had an election, and it was one of the largest voter turnouts ever by over 500 voters. The citizens of Bel Air overwhelmingly voted for 3 town commissioners that advocated smaller projects other than the candidate by more than 3-to-1 margin. This election clearly sent the message that the citizens of Bel Air want progress that is more in scale and keeping with our small town charm. As their representatives, this board should take into consideration the citizens' voice as expressed in the last election. You have the discretion to interpret the language in the town code where it allows, and you should interpret it in the light of what the citizens that you represent voted for. The term clear and convincing evidence is up to you to define. You have to ask yourselves, did this applicant provide clear and convincing evidence of uniqueness and practical difficulty? What is the inherent characteristics not generally shared by surrounding properties? The properties on Pennsylvania Avenue all have a similar slope to what's on Hickory Avenue. So how is this property unique that it requires a variance? Granting a variance that would make the property more profitable or viable is not a reason to grant a variance. You also have the discretion to define what is unnecessarily burdensome. When it comes to deciding if conforming to regulations would be unnecessary burdensome, the applicant has not provided any evidence of how that would make this project more complex or how much more it would cost to make it conform to those regulations. They need to provide clear and convincing evidence such as alternative plans supported by cost estimates in order for you to make a judgment of whether conforming to current regulations would be unnecessarily burdensome. All the applicant did was state in their application that it would be burdensome without any quantitative evidence to substantiate their statement. What is before you this evening is a new request for a variance. The applicant let this variance lapse back in April of 2024. The variance granted back in April of 2022 should have no bearing on whether to approve it or to not approve the request. The citizens of this town who you have chosen to represent have voiced to you what they want, evident by the last election. We want progress, but progress that is in the right scale for our town. You have an opportunity to do the right thing here by taking an interpretation of the code, which are you empowered to do, that is in line with the vast majority of the voters that you represent. The applicant has not provided clear and convincing evidence of unique characteristic not shared by surrounding properties, nor evidence that conforming to current regulations would be unnecessarily burdensome. You must follow the town code, regardless of what was done 2 years ago. Please deny this request on the grounds they have not provided sufficient evidence to make the case. Thank you.
Good evening, Errol Letting, 507 North Shamrock Road, and I listen to attorneys, so I won't be asking you any questions there. But I would ask if you, in your deliberations, to check on the code, the building code, if this could be permitted, built with 8-foot ceilings as opposed to 9-foot ceilings, and then they wouldn't need the height variance. I would say that's probably market-driven, that people want higher ceilings now, but that's solely for the, to make this more money for the developers. And so I don't think we should be in that thing. Another concern I have is the harmony, the applicant has demonstrated the height of the proposed stuff will be in harmony with the surrounding neighborhoods. I'm afraid of the canyon effect. You know, the gentleman from Reed Street in Baltimore talked about that. We live in Bel Air because we like open space. So you really, is the library going to be blotted out from the sun? And again, maybe your engineer can tell us that, by the new apartment building that's raised above that. So you really, and everybody's been in a big city where the wind goes whipping down. Well, that's Oklahoma anyway, but also, you know, with the canyon effect there, the cold. And it's really not in harmony with the neighborhood. And that's really, I would urge you not to grant the variance on that. The other thing is, you have to question whether this group really has their stuff together. Are they capable of building a building like this? When they let a technical variance like this expire, it really doesn't give you confidence on that. The other thing is that for the gentleman from Reed Street in Baltimore to say that he knows Bel Air and committed to it, well, everybody saw all the signs, saw the elections, no more apartments in Bel Air. And so to think that he's representing or providing a service to Bel Air that they want he's ill-informed on that. So thank you, and I hope you reject the.
Are there any other comments at this time? All right, in that case, I would like to close the meeting, close the hearing. There's no further statements or evidence, and the case will be discussed among the board members. So what we need to determine, as has been brought up before, is there uniqueness and practical difficulty with this request.
Yeah, I think the geometry and the topography are both issues that make this project unique, so I think it does meet that uniqueness threshold, so that's my take.
I would agree as well. with the 17 feet.
You need, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I would agree as well with the 17 feet difference between one end to the other.
Yeah.
Well, and the fact that we're really talking about 2 or 3 inches in reality versus 1.5 feet.
Yeah.
You know, I think the theme that we've heard about no more apartments in Bel Air, we're not going to be able to stop building this apartment. It's going up no matter what. So whether it be 8-foot ceilings or 9-foot ceilings, does it really matter? And does 1.5 feet or really 2 or 3 inches in this grand scheme of things, is that really? Is there a reason to stop building this building as it is for 2 or 3 inches?
Over an administrative technicality, yeah, with the expiration, so.
So I think, you know, I agree this is a new case. I was on the board when it was passed the first time. You know, again, we're not gonna be able to stop building this building. I don't think that's the reason why we're here. So, again, uniqueness and practical difficulty. If we can show that, then I think we should make a motion.
Yeah, again, I think the the topography feeds that, right, that characteristic, right? If this was a flat and level lot, we wouldn't be having this discussion, right? So I think one feeds the other. I think they're both interrelated. So I think the practical difficulty is the geometry of the site and the topography of the site that makes the design of this project difficult. So.
I agree. Chairman, comments?
I still go back to the 17 feet difference between the one side to the other. Can you not hear me still? I said, the topography with the 17 feet difference between one corner to the other does appear to me to be unique for this property.
And I think the shape of the building as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Entertain a motion?
Let's do it.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the variance requested by Hickory Flats related to a variance of 1.5 feet to the building height restriction of 45 feet, resulting in a 46.5-foot building on the property located at 28 North Hickory Avenue be approved based on the testimony and other evidence provided by the applicant and a review of section 165-92 of the Bel Air Development Regulations. This is based on a finding of fact that following application of the code for the proposed development has been satisfied by the applicant. The property is unique with characteristics not generally shared with other surrounding properties and specifically based on the site topography resulting in a 17-foot elevation change. The property has an inefficient and unique boundary configuration similar to a triangle, at its point being the corner of Pennsylvania Avenue and Hickory Avenue. There is practical difficulty. The strict compliance with the code would unreasonably prevent the applicant from using the property or being unnecessarily burdensome based on the property's topography and shape. The granting the variance will do substantial justice to the applicant and surrounding neighborhood by allowing efficient use of the available land. That granting the variance as proposed will allow the spirit of the code to be observed. The practical difficulty or property uniqueness is not the result of any action by the applicant with minimal variance to the building height. The property is adjacent to a parking structure of 65 plus or minus feet and office buildings of 2 to 4 stories, allowing the proposed structure to be in harmony with the neighborhood.
Can I get a second?
I second that.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The variance passes 3-0. All right, at this point,
As I told you before, there's no submissions for December, so no meeting in December.
okay, good deal. Thanks to all who participated in this Board of Appeals meeting. We appreciate your interest and attendance. This time, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
May I get a second?
Second.
Motion to adjourn has passed, and the meeting is now adjourned.
Since we won't see you, happy holidays to all three of you.